The bus wheezed to a stop, its brakes sighing like a dying man. The sign for the town was so faded it was almost an apology. Redemption Creek. Population shrinking. Jack Reacher stepped off the bus and onto the cracked pavement, the midday sun beating down with an oppressive, dry heat. He had no destination, no plan. Redemption Creek was just a name on a map, a place to get a cup of coffee and maybe a piece of pie before catching the next ride to wherever it was going. He owned nothing but the clothes on his back and the folding toothbrush in his pocket. It was all he ever needed. The town square was a study in decay. Boarded-up storefronts stared out like blind eyes. The paint on the remaining businesses was peeling, and a solitary flag drooped from its pole in front of a building that might have been the town hall. There was a diner, a general store, and a sheriff's office. A silence hung in the air that wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, watchful. Reacher walked toward the diner, the only place showing signs of life. The bell above the door chimed a rusty, forgotten tune. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. A woman with tired eyes and a stained apron wiped down the counter. A few old men sat in a booth, nursing their coffees, their faces etched with the kind of resignation that comes from watching your world slowly die. He took a seat at the counter. "Coffee black," he said. The woman nodded, not meeting his eyes. She poured the coffee into a thick ceramic mug and slid it across the counter. As Reacher reached for it, the bell chimed again. Two men entered. They weren't locals. They wore cheap suits that didn't fit right and had the kind of smirks that meant they enjoyed their power, however small. They walked straight to a table where a young man sat alone, staring into a half-eaten plate of eggs. He looked terrified. "Time to pay up, Billy," the first man said, his voice a low growl. Billy flinched. "I just need another week. The harvest was bad." "The boss doesn't care about your harvest," the second man said, cracking his knuckles. "He cares about his money." Reacher took a slow sip of his coffee. It was bitter, burnt. He watched the scene in the reflection of the chrome napkin dispenser. He'd seen this 100 times in 100 different towns. Petty thugs leaning on someone who couldn't fight back. Usually he'd finish his coffee and leave. It wasn't his business. But something was different here. The fear in the diner was palpable. It wasn't just Billy. It was the waitress. The old men in the booth. They were all holding their breath. The first thug grabbed Billy by the collar. "Let's take a walk." Billy looked around helplessly, his eyes pleading. No one moved. No one spoke. That's when Reacher decided it was his business after all. He set his mug down with a soft click. The sound seemed to echo in the silent room. "Let him go," Reacher said, his voice calm and even. He didn't turn around. The thugs froze. They looked at each other, then at the back of Reacher's head. The first one laughed, a short, ugly sound. "And who the hell are you?" "The guy who told you to let him go," Reacher said. He took another sip of coffee. The thug pushed Billy aside and strode toward the counter. He was big but soft in the middle. He tried to look menacing, puffing out his chest. "You got a death wish, pal?" Reacher finally turned on his stool, slowly, deliberately. He was bigger than the thug, harder. He looked the man in the eyes. "You have two choices. You can walk out that door and forget about Billy, or I can break your arm in 3 places before you hit the floor. Your choice." For a moment, there was only the hum of the old refrigerator. The thug's bravado faltered. He saw something in Reacher's eyes he didn't understand, a complete lack of fear and an absolute certainty. He glanced at his partner, who looked equally unsettled. "This ain't over," the thug mumbled, backing away. They turned and walked out of the diner, the bell mocking their retreat. Billy was still trembling. He came over to the counter. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know what you've done." "They'll be back," Reacher said. "Who's their boss?" Billy's face went pale. He shook his head and practically ran out of the diner. The waitress finally looked at Reacher, her eyes a mixture of fear and something else. maybe a flicker of hope. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sheriff Brody doesn't like outsiders interfering." "The sheriff sent them?" Reacher asked. She just looked at him, her expression saying everything. She refilled his coffee cup without him asking and moved away, her message delivered. So the local law was the local muscle. This wasn't just a dying town, it was a sick one. Reacher finished his second cup of coffee. He had planned on leaving Redemption Creek in an hour. Now he thought he might stick around for a while. He left a few dollars on the counter and walked out into the oppressive heat. He headed for the sheriff's office. The building was made of brick, the only one on the block that looked maintained. A brand new patrol car was parked out front, its immaculate polish a stark contrast to the town's decay. The money was going somewhere. Inside, a young deputy sat behind a desk looking bored. He straightened up when Reacher walked in. "Can I help you?" the deputy asked, his hand drifting instinctively toward his sidearm. "I want to see the sheriff," Reacher said. "He's busy. What's this about?" "It's about two of his collectors roughing up a local farmer in the diner." The deputy's face hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," Reacher said, leaning on the desk. "He's about 5'10", brown hair, cheap suit. His friend is taller, dumber. They just left the diner." Before the deputy could respond, a door opened at the back of the office. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a crisp sheriff's uniform, a silver star gleaming on his chest. This had to be Brody. "I'll handle this, Roscoe," the sheriff said, his voice smooth but with an edge of steel. The deputy scurried away. "I'm Sheriff Brody. You must be the stranger causing a stir at the diner." "I'm just a guy who doesn't like to see people pushed around," Reacher said. Brody smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We have our own way of doing things in Redemption Creek. We handle our own problems. I appreciate you minding your own business." It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. "When the law is the problem, whose business is it then?" Reacher countered. Brody's smile vanished. "There's a bus leaving at 6. I strongly suggest you be on it." He turned and walked back into his office, closing the door behind him. The threat was clear. Reacher walked back out into the sun. 6 o'clock. He had a few hours. Instead of heading for the bus station, he started walking through the town, observing. He noticed things. The expensive new tires on the sheriff's car. The surveillance cameras mounted on the streetlights, all pointing toward the main road out of town. The way people would avert their eyes when they saw him hurrying indoors. This wasn't a town, it was a prison, and Sheriff Brody was the warden. He found the town library, a small, dusty building tucked away on a side street. He figured if there were any answers to be found, they might be in the town's history. Inside, it was cool and quiet. A young woman sat behind the circulation desk reading a book. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wide with surprise. She clearly didn't get many visitors. "Can I help you?" she asked. She had intelligent eyes, curious and wary at the same time. "I'm interested in the town's history," Reacher said. "Specifically the last few years, how a place like this ends up on life support." Her guard went up immediately. "Most people are interested in leaving, not learning about it." "I'm not most people," Reacher said. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she said hesitantly. "I'm the librarian." "Reacher, I was just having a conversation with Sheriff Brody. He seems to think I should leave town." Sarah's face paled. "Then you should listen to him. It's not safe to cross him." "That's what I'm trying to understand. What exactly is he doing to this town?" She looked around the empty library, as if the walls might be listening. She lowered her voice. "Look, a few years ago the old mine shut down. It was the town's only real industry. People started leaving. Then Brody was elected. He promised to bring prosperity back, and in a way, he did. Money started coming in, but the town kept dying. Businesses closed, but Brody and his deputies got new cars. People who asked too many questions. They had accidents, or they just disappeared." "What kind of business is he in?" Reacher asked. I don't know for sure, she whispered, her hands trembling slightly. But there are trucks, late at night. They come from the south and head out toward the old abandoned mines. They never come through town during the day. Abandoned mines, a corrupt sheriff, late-night trucks. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was an ugly one. Why haven't you left? Reacher asked. This is my home. My family is buried here. I can't just abandon it. She looked at him, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. Why are you asking all this? You'll just leave like everyone else. Maybe, Reacher said, but Brody told me to be on the 6 o'clock bus. I don't like being told what to do. As he spoke, the library door opened. Deputy Roscoe stood there, a smug look on his face. Reacher, he said, the sheriff wants another word with you. Reacher looked at Sarah. Her face was a mask of terror. It's okay, he said to her quietly. Then he turned to the deputy. Lead the way. Roscoe walked him out of the library and not toward the sheriff's office, but toward an alley between two derelict buildings. The two thugs from the diner were waiting there. The sheriff is tired of you, Roscoe said, drawing his nightstick. He wanted us to give you a more forceful suggestion to leave town. The three of them spread out, blocking the alley's exit. They thought they had him trapped. They were wrong. They were trapped in the alley with him. You should have just let me finish my coffee, Reacher said. The first thug from the diner charged, swinging a wild punch. Reacher sidestepped, letting the man's momentum carry him past. He brought his elbow up in a short, sharp arc, connecting with the base of the man's skull. The thug dropped like a sack of cement, unconscious before he hit the ground. The second thug hesitated, his eyes wide. Roscoe shouted, "Get him!" and swung his nightstick. Reacher blocked the strike with his forearm, the impact jarring but manageable. He grabbed the nightstick, twisted it out of the deputy's hand, and snapped it over his knee. He drove the broken end into Roscoe's gut. The deputy gasped, doubling over. Reacher brought his knee up, connecting with the deputy's face. There was a sickening crunch of bone, and Roscoe fell backward, out cold. The last thug was now backing away, his hands up. "Hey, man, I don't want no trouble." "A little late for that," Reacher said, advancing on him. The man turned to run. Reacher took 2 long strides and kicked the back of the man's knee. The leg buckled, and he went down with a cry of pain. Reacher stood over him for a second, then walked away, leaving the 3 of them groaning in the dirt. He knew he had just declared war. Brody wouldn't take this lying down. He had to move fast. He went back to the library. Sarah was anxiously pacing behind the desk. "They took you," she breathed, relief washing over her face when she saw him. "Are you all right?" "They're not," Reacher said. "We don't have much time. You mentioned trucks and the old mines. Show me on a map." She pulled out a detailed county map and spread it on a table. Her finger traced a path. "The main highway is here, but there are old service roads, mostly forgotten. They lead up into the hills, to the Kleiner Ridge mining complex. It's been abandoned for a decade." "That's where they're running their operation," Reacher said. "Whatever it is, it's big enough to finance the sheriff and his whole department." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and awe. "I'm going to end it," Reacher said. "But I need to get you somewhere safe first. When Brody finds his men, he's going to come for you next. He knows you talked to me." Her face hardened with resolve. "No, I'm not running. I told you this is my home. I'm tired of being scared. I'll help you." Reacher looked at her. He saw the fear, but he also saw a core of strength he hadn't expected. He preferred to work alone, but he knew she had knowledge of the area that he didn't, and he knew Brody would use her as a hostage if he left her behind. "All right," he said. "Here's the plan. Brody thinks I'm a drifter. He doesn't know what I am. We're going to use that. He'll expect me to either run or to try a direct assault. We're not going to do either." Night fell over Redemption Creek like a shroud. The dying town became a ghost town, its empty streets bathed in the pale glow of a few lonely streetlights. Reacher and Sarah slipped out the back of the library. She had an old pickup truck, rusted but reliable, hidden in a garage behind her small house. "They'll be looking for us," she whispered as she started the engine. It turned over with a protesting groan. "They'll be looking for us in town or on the main road out," Reacher said, studying the map under the faint light of the dashboard. "We're not going to be on either. Take this back road. It's a longer route to the mines, but it should be clear." They drove in silence for a while, the truck's headlights cutting a tunnel through the darkness of the surrounding desert. The paved road gave way to dirt, and the ride became a jarring, bone-rattling journey. "What were you?" Sarah finally asked, her eyes fixed on the treacherous road. "Before all this, I was in the army," Reacher said. "Military police." "So you're a cop?" "Not anymore. Now I'm just passing through." "You seem to do a lot more than just pass through." Reacher didn't answer. He was focused on the darkness outside, scanning for any sign of Brody's men. He knew the sheriff would have sent everyone he had out looking for them. Brody couldn't afford a witness, and Reacher had made it clear he wouldn't be intimidated. After another hour, Sarah slowed the truck. "We're close. The main entrance to the mine complex is about 2 miles ahead. There will be guards." "Pull over here," Reacher said, pointing to a dense patch of mesquite trees. "We go the rest of the way on foot." He got out of the truck and pulled a tire iron from the toolkit in the back. It wasn't a gun, but it was heavy and solid. It would do. "You should stay here," he told Sarah. "It's going to get dangerous." "No," she said, her jaw set. "I know the layout of this place. My grandfather worked these mines his whole life. There are other ways in besides the main gate. Tunnels and ventilation shafts the company sealed up, but the seals are old. I can get you inside." Reacher weighed the options. She was a liability in a fight, but her knowledge was an asset he couldn't ignore. "All right. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. No arguments." She nodded, her eyes wide but determined. They moved through the brush, the night sounds of the desert their only cover. After a 20-minute hike, they reached a ridge overlooking the Kleiner Ridge mine. The place was far from abandoned. Floodlights lit up a large clearing in front of the main tunnel entrance. A large semi-truck was backed up to a loading dock that had been recently constructed. Men with rifles patrolled the perimeter. In the center of it all, directing the operation, was Sheriff Brody. They were loading crates into the truck. From his vantage point, Reacher couldn't see what was inside, but it was a professional, efficient operation. This wasn't some small-time smuggling ring. This was big. "What's in the boxes?" Reacher whispered. "I don't know," Sarah said. "But a few months ago I was processing some old town deeds for the Historical Society. The Kleiner Ridge property was sold to a shell corporation based out of Mexico. The sale was pushed through by Brody himself." Mexico. The trucks coming from the south, the armed guards. It clicked into place. Weapons or drugs. Something that required this level of security. "There," Sarah whispered, pointing to a spot on the hillside away from the lights. "An old ventilation shaft. It's a steep climb down, but it should lead into one of the secondary tunnels, well behind their main operation." They made their way to the shaft. It was covered by a rusted iron grate. Reacher used the tire iron, and with a loud groan of protesting metal, he pried it open. A wave of cool, musty air washed over them. "Stay behind me," he said, and lowered himself into the darkness. The shaft was a narrow, vertical drop, with a series of iron rungs set into the rock wall. It was a long way down. Hand over hand, rung by rung, they descended into the blackness of the earth. The shaft opened into a tunnel that was pitch black and silent. Reacher paused, letting his eyes adjust. A faint draft of air told him the direction of the main complex. He moved forward, his feet silent on the dusty ground, the tire iron held ready in his hand. Sarah followed so closely he could hear her breathing. They moved through a labyrinth of intersecting tunnels. Twice, they heard the distant echo of voices and froze. pressing themselves against the cold rock walls until the sounds faded. Sarah guided them with a certainty that could only come from childhood stories and an intimate knowledge of the place's history. Finally, they saw a faint light ahead. It was coming from a larger cavern where the secondary tunnel they were in connected. Reacher motioned for Sarah to stay back. He crept forward to the edge of the opening and looked in. The cavern was being used as a storage and packing area. It was filled with crates, some open. Reacher could see what was inside now. Not drugs, not weapons. It was people. Young men and women, huddled together, their faces etched with fear and despair. It was a human trafficking operation. Brody wasn't just smuggling contraband. He was smuggling lives, treating people like cargo. A cold rage, clean and precise, settled over Reacher. Brody was there, talking to one of the men in suits Reacher had seen earlier in the diner. "The new batch is ready to go," the suit was saying. "The buyer is getting impatient." "The buyer can wait," Brody snapped. "I've got a problem, a drifter, and the local librarian. They know something. I've got every man I have out looking for them. Once they're found and dealt with, the truck will roll." "Just make it fast," the suit said. "This is a multi-million-dollar shipment. We can't afford any complications." Reacher had heard enough. He backed away from the opening and returned to Sarah. He told her what he'd seen. Her face went ashen, but her resolve didn't waver. "We have to help them," she whispered. "We will," Reacher said. "But we have to be smart. There are at least a dozen armed men here. We need to even the odds." He looked around the dark tunnel. The mine itself would be the weapon. "This place is old," he said. "Are there any unstable sections? Any old blasting equipment left behind?" Sarah's eyes lit up with understanding. "Yes, Tunnel C4. My grandfather always said they had to abandon it because it was too unstable. It runs directly above the main cavern, and I think I know where the old dynamite storage is. They used to keep it in a lead-lined bunker to protect it from moisture. They found the bunker after another 10 minutes of searching. The door was thick steel, but the lock was old and rusted. Reacher used the tire iron as a lever, putting his full weight into it. With a deafening screech, the lock broke. Inside, there were several crates of old sweating dynamite. It was dangerously unstable, which made it perfect. There were also blasting caps and wiring. "This will work," Reacher said. They carried a crate of dynamite back toward Tunnel C4. Following Sarah's directions, they found a spot on the tunnel floor directly above the main cavern. The rock was already fractured and weak. Reacher worked quickly, his military demolition training coming back to him as if he'd used it yesterday. He placed the charges carefully, wiring them to a single detonator. "When I set this, it's going to bring a few tons of rock down on that cavern," he explained to Sarah. "It'll block the main entrance and cause chaos. In that confusion, we free the prisoners, and I take care of Brody." "What about us?" Sarah asked. "How do we get out?" "There's another way," she said, her mind racing. "An old ore cart track. It leads to a surface exit on the far side of the ridge. It's a long shot, but it should be clear." "Good," Reacher said. He finished connecting the wires. "All right, go get the prisoners ready. Tell them what's about to happen. Tell them to run for the ore cart track the second they hear the explosion. Don't wait for me." "What about you?" she asked again. "I have a score to settle with the sheriff." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and disappeared back down the tunnel. Reacher waited. He counted to 200, giving her enough time to get into position. Then he pushed the plunger on the detonator. The world exploded. A deep, rumbling roar echoed through the tunnels, and the ground beneath his feet shook violently. A cloud of dust and debris billowed up from the cavern below. He heard shouts, screams, the sound of twisting metal. The first part of the plan had worked. Reacher moved, running back the way he came, the tire iron held tight in his hand. He didn't head for the escape route. He headed for the chaos. He emerged into the main cavern to a scene of utter pandemonium. The entrance was completely blocked by a mountain of fallen rock. Dust was so thick it was hard to see. Men were shouting, choking, disoriented. The floodlights had been shattered, and the only light came from the headlights of the semi-truck, cutting eerie beams through the swirling dust. He saw a group of people, the prisoners, running, Sarah leading them toward a dark tunnel on the far side of the cavern. A few of Brody's men saw them and started to raise their rifles, but Reacher was on them before they could get a shot off. He moved like a phantom through the dust and shadows. The first guard went down with a single, precise blow from the tire iron to the side of his head. The second turned, and Reacher drove the end of the iron bar into his sternum, collapsing his chest. A third fired his rifle blindly into the dust. Reacher closed the distance in 2 steps, disarmed him, and broke his arm with a sharp, efficient twist. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of calculated violence. In less than a minute, 5 of Brody's men were down, and the path for the escaping prisoners was clear. Then, through the dust, he saw Brody. The sheriff had his pistol out, trying to restore order. His eyes met Reacher's across the ruined cavern. The pretense was gone. This was no longer a sheriff and a drifter. It was 2 predators, and only one was going to walk away. "Reacher!" Brody bellowed, his voice raw with fury. "You're a dead man!" He fired, the gunshot deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet ricocheted off the rock wall near Reacher's head. Reacher didn't flinch. He used the piles of debris as cover, circling, closing the distance. Brody fired again. Reacher felt a searing pain in his side, a hot poker driving through his flesh. He grunted, stumbled, but kept moving. The wound was bad, but not debilitating. Not yet. He lunged from behind a pile of fallen rock, tackling Brody and sending them both crashing to the ground. The sheriff's gun skittered away into the darkness. Brody was strong, his muscles corded from years of bullying and brawling. He rolled on top of Reacher, his hands going for Reacher's throat. They wrestled in the dirt and grime, a desperate, brutal fight. Brody had the weight, but Reacher had the technique and a reservoir of cold fury. He slammed the heel of his palm into Brody's nose, feeling the cartilage give way. Brody roared in pain, blood pouring down his face. Reacher used the moment to reverse their positions. He was on top now, his hands pinning Brody's arms. "It's over, Brody," Reacher growled, his voice tight with pain from the gunshot wound. "This is my town," Brody spat, blood and defiance in his eyes. He bucked, trying to throw Reacher off. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, he managed to get a hand free. He reached for a chunk of rock, his fingers closing around it. He swung it wildly, catching Reacher on the side of the head. Reacher's vision exploded in a flash of white. He fell back, stunned. Brody scrambled to his feet, grabbing his lost pistol from the floor. He aimed it at Reacher, who was struggling to get up, his head swimming. "Any last words?" Brody sneered, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. Reacher looked at him, his vision clearing. "Yeah," he said. "You missed one." From the darkness behind Brody, a shape emerged. It was the young farmer, Billy, the one Reacher had saved in the diner. In his hands he held a heavy mining shovel. He must have been one of the prisoners in the cavern. Before Brody could react, Billy swung the shovel with all the strength and pent-up frustration of a man who had been terrorized for too long. The flat of the shovel connected with the back of Brody's head with a sickening thud. The sheriff's eyes went wide with surprise, and then he crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Reacher pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. He pressed a hand to the wound in his side. It was bleeding freely. Billy rushed over, his face a mix of terror and triumph. Is it over?" Billy asked. "It is now," Reacher said. Sarah came running back from the escape tunnel, her face frantic with worry. "Reacher, you're hurt." "I'll live," he said, gritting his teeth against the pain. "Get everyone out of here. The state police will be here soon." "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Before we left the library, I used your computer," he said. "Sent an anonymous email to the state police headquarters, told them about suspicious activity at the old Kleiner Ridge mine. With all this noise, they should have a patrol on the way to check it out." Sirens echoed in the far distance. It was time to go. "Come with us," Sarah pleaded. "Let me help you." Reacher shook his head. I don't stick around. It's better that way. He looked at Billy. You did good. The young farmer nodded, standing a little taller than he had that morning in the diner. Reacher turned and limped into the darkness of the escape tunnel, ignoring Sarah's calls. He followed the old ore cart tracks, the pain in his side a dull rhythmic throb. He emerged minutes later on the other side of the ridge, the cool night air a balm on his skin. He could hear the sirens getting closer now, converging on the mine. He didn't look back. He walked down the hill, found a deserted road, and kept walking. By dawn, he was miles away. He had cleaned and crudely stitched his wound with a needle and thread he'd bought from an all-night gas station. He sat at a dusty bus stop in another forgotten town, waiting. A bus pulled up, its destination sign reading simply, East. That was good enough for him. He got on, paid the driver in cash, and took a seat in the back. As the bus pulled away, he looked out the window at the road stretching out before him. He had arrived in Redemption Creek with nothing, and he was leaving with nothing. But the town behind him wasn't dying anymore. It had a chance to live again. For Jack Reacher, that was more than enough. The bus picked up speed, carrying him toward the horizon, just another ghost on the highway.